Welcome to the Joint Legislative Oversight and Sunset Committee meeting. My name is Senator Kyle Evans-Gay. I'm chair of this committee for this year. I would like to ask first that the committee members introduce themselves, and starting with our vice chair, Representative Dorsey Walker.
Good morning, State Representative Sherry Dorsey Walker. I represent the 3rd District, which is the west side of Wilmington.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Hansen.
Hello, State Senator Stephanie Hansen, District 10, which is part of Middletown, part of Bear Glasgow, and a little bit of Newark.
Good morning. Representative Johnson.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Kendra Johnson, 5th District, a little bit of a lot of things, a little bit of Newark, a little bit of Newcastle, a little bit of Bear. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Griffith.
Good morning, Krista Griffith, representing the 12th District, from east to west, Fairfax to Hocus, and we covered it all. Thanks.
Thank you. Representative Spiegelman.
I love all these all things and a lot of things. I'm Representative Jeff Spiegelman. I represent the 11th District, which has the most zip codes of any representative or Senate district in the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Yerrick.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Lyndon Yerrick. I serve the 34th Representative District, which is the heart of Kent County.
But just with not a lot of zip codes, I guess, right? Good. Thank you very much. Good morning, Senator Pettyjohn.
Good morning, Senator Brian Pettyjohn, 19th District, Bridgeville, Georgetown, and a lot of stuff in between.
Thank you. Senator Pinckney.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Senator Marie Pinckney, representing the 13th District, parts but not all of Newark, Newcastle, and Bear.
Good morning. And Senator Richardson, good morning.
I'm muted. Okay, Senator Richardson, I represent the 21st District of Seaford down to Delaware, including Gumboro and some other sections of the Sussex County, and I have not counted my zip codes. I'm sorry.
Next meeting. Good morning, Senator. Thank you so much. If we could, I'd like the staff to introduce themselves, starting with our analyst, Amanda.
Hi, good morning. I'm Amanda McAtee. I am one of 2 analysts for the committee.
My name is Mark Brainerd. Good morning. I am the 2nd analyst for the committee.
Good morning. I'm Holly Vaughn Wagner, and I am the committee's legislative attorney.
Hello, my name is Natalie White, and I'm the administrative support staff for the committee.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Elliot Gray, and I'm the legislative fellow for the committee.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome back after our JFC break. It's lovely to be back together with everybody now that we are all incredibly busy and having, oh, I'm sorry, Representative Griffith.
Yes, and I'm gonna have a hard time all day if I don't get an answer to this real quick. To Representative Spiegelman, how many zip codes, sir? I just want to verify his claim.
Middletown, Odessa, Townsend, Smyrna, Clayton, Hartley, Marydale, Kenton. I actually have 2 in Dover. Odessa, I'm sorry, Wyoming, Camden, Wyoming.
That's fine. You've exceeded mine. I trust that now. It was gonna bother me. Sorry.
Okay. Point of order. I don't think he answered the question. You asked for zip codes. He gave you towns.
All those towns have zip codes, at least as far as Postal Service is concerned.
But Camden, Wyoming has a separate one from Camden and Wyoming.
Well, we know where our USPS resources are going, so I'm excited to see Representative Spiegelman support that agency moving forward. If the committee could take a minute to review the February 16, 2021 draft minutes. We're going to share them on the screen. I'm sure many of us have seen these in our inboxes before.
Madam Chair, motion to approve.
If anyone's prepared, I'd like a motion to approve.
Yes, motion to approve, Madam Chair.
Yep. And I'll second.
Thank you so much. All those in favor, please signify by your silence. All those opposed, please unmute and say nay. Okay, hearing no objections, the motion passes. Thank you. So our meeting today is going to look a little bit different than some of our meetings have looked before, but of course, thanks to the pandemic, no two Sunset Committee meetings this year appears will look alike. So today, as everyone is aware, we're going to do two different activities. One is to review draft legislation, and I'll turn that over in a minute to Holly. Then the second is we're going to take a look at the potential entities for review in 2022. So Holly, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you and good morning. I wanted to give just a brief overview of the process and procedure of what we do with these draft bills. So this morning I'm going to present 3 draft bills to you. They have not been released. They are part of recommendations for entities that you have reviewed. You'll have a chance to discuss them, ask any questions that you have. If you have edits that you want to have made, we can do that. If the bills are in shape and you're ready to have them released, someone can make a motion to approve them, at which point I go back and I add everyone who wants to be a sponsor to the sponsorship, and then I release the bill and the bill goes on to the normal legislative process. If there are edits or questions that can't be answered today and you're not ready to approve the bill for release, then I take the bill back and I get the answers or make the edits and I bring it back to you for reconsideration at a future meeting. So that's kind of the lay of the land for how we go through the drafts. So the first one I wanted to present to you is the DACTI bill. So it's the Delaware Advisory Council on Career and Technical Education. This bill does one thing and it's pretty straightforward. It adds another requirement to the annual report that they already have to provide. And so now this bill will require them to include in their annual report information for students and families to access information regarding educational, employment, and training opportunities. Pretty straightforward. So if anyone had any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Are there any questions for Holly at this time? If you can use the raise hand feature, that would be helpful. Representative Spiegelman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Correct me if I'm wrong. Some of us who have been here when this organization was here, this was kind of something they were doing anyway, right? They were starting to do this, and at this point, we're just codifying it. Is that what's happening?
I believe so, but I'd like to ask if Mark could answer that question. He may have better information on it.
Sure. When we held DACTI's holdover meeting in February of 2020, there was still some discussion from the committee about what steps DACTI was taking to provide career and tech students with timely information regarding educational, employment, training, et cetera. So the committee adopted the recommendation that is highlighted here to continue that process of providing that information and what information was being provided. So it's essentially just codifying that holdover recommendation that the committee adopted in February of 2020. Does that answer your question, Representative?
It does. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments regarding this piece of legislation? Oh, Representative Yerrick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as Representative Spiegelman brought out, that I think looking back, what we were encouraging them to do, they were to improve their communication to the work that they were doing. If we can remember that they literally brought in copies of their report that encouraged young adults to get engaged in trades and career choices that way. We wanted them to improve their website. We just wanted them to do a better job of sharing with their stakeholders, students primarily through middle school and high school, of what resources were available. So I think Mark summed it up pretty neatly and pretty easily in the language. Thank you.
Senator, if I could just clarify 1.2, Representative Yerrick's point, since the time that this recommendation was adopted, DACTI has created a Twitter account and has started that process of, just easily retweeting job openings or classes, trainings, et cetera. So it's a continuous process that they have been doing since they came before JLOSC.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to approve this draft legislation?
I'll make that motion to approve the draft
Okay.
legislation as written.
Chris-
Was that second from you, Representative Griffith?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, excellent. All those in favor, please signify with your silence. If you oppose, please unmute and say nay. Okay, hearing no opposition, the motion passes and we can move forward with that draft legislation. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you. So the next one I want to talk about is for the Delaware Health Information Network. And this is related to the organization Gift of Life, which is Delaware's organ procurement organization. This bill will require that DEN provide access to its clinical data when a potential anatomical donor is a determination whether the potential anatomical donor is needed, and they need that information from DEN. So that DEN and Gift of Life can work together to determine whether or not a donation can be made.
And I know we have some guests today, and I'm wondering if, I'm going to ask for questions or comments from the committee, but then I would appreciate if you have any comments to hear those as well. But first to the committee members, does anybody have questions or comments related to this draft? Representative Spiegelman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is this not happening now? It seems like the kind of thing that really should happen now. Or is the barrier what we're talking about almost a HIPAA violation? Can somebody answer the need for this piece of legislation? Again, this was if you answered this question 2 years ago when we had you in front of us, my apologies. I honestly don't remember.
And I'll let Holly answer, or maybe potentially hand it over to someone else if she'd like.
I would ask to hand it over to someone representing DEN because they'll certainly have better details about that than I.
All right. Dr. Lee, I see you've unmuted. Would you like to share?
Yes. So right now, we we are able, if the Gift of Life organization works with a physician or credentialed user of our system, that individual can get information on behalf of Gift of Life. But at the present time, just the restrictions on who's allowed to have access to the clinical data does not permit us to provide this information directly to Gift of Life. We totally support this legislation. We agree with you that it is something that should be happening. This language will simply remove the barriers and allow us to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm envisioning this, and thank you for that. I'm envisioning this as a real potential safety issue if you're talking about a donor, but you don't have access to all of the medical information that you would need in order to make the decision of whether or not that donor is appropriate for the donee.
We actually had a situation where they almost weren't able to use a donor because there was a somewhat nebulous history of cancer. And through the mediation of a physician in one of our subscribing organizations, they were able to get into our system and see more details about that and make the determination that the type of cancer involved did not preclude organ donation. So this was a real world case where access to the information in our system enabled an organ donation to occur that would otherwise not have been acceptable. And so, again, it was because there was a physician there that was ready and able and willing to use their login credentials to obtain this information. It would be very reassuring to know that Gift of Life could do this at any time without having to find a physician who would mediate it for them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Richardson, I believe, had a question, but you took your hand down, sir.
That's correct. I figured it out myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Yerrick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as a reminder, I think it's time. Could you share with the committee again, anytime we have healthcare information, data, what are the safeguards that we're doing to preserve and protect that data in regard to the safety, the firewalls, to try to keep the hackers out, put it that way? If we're adding more and more opportunities, how are we, in our best ability, preserving and protecting the integrity of that data that's being shared?
The answer to that would be a very long discussion. Maybe the short version is that we are seeking and maintaining certification under the High Trust Organization, which is kind of the gold standard in security best practices. So every 2 years, we undergo a recertification activity, and in the interim years, there's an interim self-assessment and recertification. So DIN was actually one of the 2 first health information exchange organizations in the country to get certified under the High Trust framework. And we have just completed our recertification, and we're just waiting for the organization to get back to us with confirmation that, that we have passed. So that framework involves very extensive security practices. There were nearly 300 individual elements of security best practices that are assessed by this organization. So I would certainly be happy to give you the details on all of them if you want, but that's the short answer, that we have third-party rigorous evaluation of our security practices on a regular and ongoing basis.
Oh, that's fine. I appreciate the effort and the pursuit of preserving and protecting that very, very valuable, but unfortunately vulnerable data that there are a lot of bad actors out there that want to get access to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Dr. Lee. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee members on this draft? All right, hearing none, Dr. Lee or other guests, are there any other comments that you'd like to share on behalf of the organization related to this draft? Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure you had an opportunity. Excellent. Is there a motion to, oh, Amanda.
I just wanted to briefly, quickly mention that all of the bills that we have 2 today for DEN, but there's a few more to follow at later meeting dates. And this was all part of the 2019 DEN task force process. So just to give our new committee members that additional information, that all of these were discussed during that process as well.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Is there a motion for this draft?
Motion to release.
Thank you, Representative.
Representative Kendra Johnson, second.
Thank you, Representative Johnson. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify with your silence. If you oppose, please unmute and say nay. Hearing no opposition, the motion passes. Thank you very much, everyone. Back to you, Holly.
Okay, thank you. So the next and last bill that I have to present to you today is also related to DIN, and the subject matter is clinical data for analytics. And I'd like to ask the chair to recognize DIN's General Counsel, Scott Perkins, because he has a much better understanding of what's going on with this bill to explain to you.
Mr. Perkins.
All right. Thank you, Senator Gay, and thank you, Holly. This bill, again, it arose out of the 2019 task force process. And what it does at a high level is take, well, let me back up for a second. So DIN, in terms of the data we hold, has 2, for lack of a better term, buckets of data. We have claims data, which came in just in the last couple of years and comes from insurers. And then we have the clinical data that we've been collecting, really since we went live, a dozen years ago or so. Because of the different timing of those 2, of bringing that data into DIN, there are different uses that we can make with the claims data versus what we can do with the clinical data. The one that's most relevant here is using the data for analytic purposes. And so being able to work with state agencies or providers or folks doing analytics into certain healthcare related questions to sort of see how care works and maybe how it can be improved, how it can cost less. Especially with the pandemic, we have seen a number of additional areas where entities are coming to us with questions, and we're using the claims data for it, but it really would be helpful to be able to pull in clinical results. And so you can really better assess the quality of care and that sort of thing. So what we discussed at the task force was taking the framework that we established with the claims database in terms of releasing data for analytic purposes, which involves a committee of our board, which is made up of data senders, of providers, of state representatives from the state, and having that board committee review the request for access and then releasing it, provided it's for an appropriate purpose and that the other sort of privacy and security issues involved are met. And so what this draft does is two things. One, it takes that concept from the claims database and moves it over to apply to our clinical data. And so it'll be the same general idea where we have a board committee that is going to be reviewing access to data. It will be required to look at any request that is not fully de-identified. The language also has additional protections that sort of codify existing DIN practices with respect to the privacy of an individual's identifiable information. And so it makes very, very clear that DIN will not be providing identifiable information to anyone unless the person who's the subject of that information consents to that, which we think is both reasonable and appropriate. The last thing that the bill does is, again, in terms of clarifying when an individual can access data that we hold about them and whether they can direct that to third parties. Those, again, are codifications of existing DIN practices. Basically, if you sign the appropriate forms and ask for your data, we give it to you. And if you want us to provide that to a third party and you give us the right HIPAA compliant authorizations, we will do that as well. And putting those into the statute will help us comply with some ONC related regulations that go into effect actually next month. So we won't have a problem with compliance, but it'll certainly confirm that our practices are also required by statute.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. I appreciate the extra context there. Are there questions? I see Representative Spiegelman has one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Perkins, thank you very much for the explanation. Let me wrap my head a little bit around the process here. Obviously, if a person wants their information, they get their information.
Yes.
If a third party wants information about that person or about whatever clinical trials they went through, whatever it is, they apply to DIN, and then DIN contacts that person and asks if it's okay, or there's a pre-authorization sheet, or
so
you're very tiny on my screen right now, so it's shaking your head.
Sorry. The way it would work now, and I believe it would continue to work under the legislation, would be if an individual would have to provide that authorization up front, either directly to us or to the third party. And then we would go through the process of confirming that the authorization that we are receiving matches the same patient that we are providing data on. But we would not reach out upon request from any company and try and obtain authorizations. That would be between that third party and the individual.
Okay, so in other words, I could pre-authorize DIN to give out my information to a third party that requests it, but DIN would still go through a process in order to ensure that that third party is legit, is in theory a medical research facility and not a third party for-profit kind of organization looking to make money off of selling people Viagra.
Yes, if there were, the way it happens most often right now is actually with life insurance. And so if you were applying for life insurance, one of the things they might ask you to sign is an authorization letting organizations like DIN provide health data about you to them, so that they can assess the risk and appropriately price their services. What ends up happening is the life insurance company or a third party that sort of collects data on their behalf approaches us, and we enter into a contract with them with strict requirements on sort of the form and content of any authorization that they would provide to us. And then when they request data, they send us the authorizations that would have to be signed by you if you were the person applying for the life insurance. And that authorization will include additional identifiers, usually your date of birth, sometimes the last 4 digits of your social or your address or something like that. And the combination of those things help us make a match in our database, where we can say, yes, this person providing the authorization is the same person that we have data on in the database, and only then would we provide data out to the third party.
Senator Gay, I just have two more quick questions, if that's okay.
Absolutely, please feel free.
Thank you. What happens, and again, I'm sure there's an answer for this somewhere, even if it's not in this section, because I honestly don't know. What happens if you have somebody with a power of attorney? Obviously, we're talking about, we're potentially talking about people's health records. A lot of people have powers of attorney for, in case they are sick. What happens in a situation like that with this authorization?
This statute, or the statutory changes that are in front of you, don't change anything with that. We would have to, right now, frankly, we don't get a lot of requests like that. And so that would be something that would probably come to my desk, and I'd have to take a look at the authorization, see if it was legitimate, probably talk to the people involved, and then make a determination as to whether we could release data or not. We do not have a sort of standard process for that.
Okay. And my final question, what happens, what's the mechanism, clawback? I'm not really sure what terminology I'm looking for here, but in case the board of directors or a subcommittee approves the data to a third party, that third party turns out to be fraudulent or something like that, is there, number one, a mechanism by which the state can go after that third party for being fraudulent? And number two, is there a mechanism through which DIN can alert the patient that indeed a third party was mistakenly authorized that should not have been?
So what
worst case scenario kind of thing.
So prior to sending data to anyone under this sort of clinical data for analytics purposes, DIN would enter into a separate agreement with that organization, and then the statute requires that. That agreement would have, that's sort of where their data use requirements and the limitations on what they can do with the data would live. And so DIN as an organization would have the ability to enforce that. It would include indemnification obligations, things like that, where if things did go wrong and if they weren't above board, we would be able to proceed against them. When you're talking about fraud, there very well may also be things that the state and the Department of Justice would be involved in to help address that situation as well. In terms of notifications to the individuals, the way it would work if someone misused the data or used it in a way that wasn't appropriate, our first notification, well, let me back up just a second. It would be unlikely to happen with identifiable data based on this, because the only way we're going to give out data that actually can be connected to a person is with that person's specific consent. And so the situation you're talking about is a little more likely, if it were to happen, to be de-identified data. And so when you're talking about de-identified data, we still would notify the data senders that provided us with that data. And so we would have to go through a notification process that went to our covered entities. And then we would work with them to determine whether HIPAA and Delaware provisions on privacy and security would require a direct notification to the patient. You know, if identifiable information somehow ended up being misused as a result of this, which again, I want to just say, I think is fairly unlikely, you know, famous last words, but especially because the person will have to consent to provide the data to that specific organization. And so we'll already be aware that the data has been disclosed. But if that did happen, I imagine that we would end up either ourselves or the entity that provided us the information would end up being required to notify the individual.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative. And I know Representative Yerrick had his hand raised, but I believe that Dr. Lee might be wanting to be responsive to that question. So Dr. Lee, just go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to just emphasize the fact that there is currently federal law that requires that HIPAA covered entities and their business associates must provide information to a third party if a patient requests it. So that's federal law under the 21st Century Cures Act. And part of what we're looking for here is to just bring state law into very visible and unambiguous conformance with what is already federal law.
Thank you, Dr. Representative Yerrick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this will be my allotment of questions or comments. But since we were a part of it, it reminds me of some points that back to the counselor, that we're talking about the interchange of data, not DNA. However, our good friends at 23andMe and Ancestry.com have been hacked in regard to the data that was so innocently supposed to be just be shared to tell me my genealogy and my heritage has now been hacked. Again, if you could just reiterate one more time, what is the process to ensure that you will not be compromising my personal healthcare data in regard to the interchange of the two entities that we've just mentioned?
So at least from our perspective, and Dr. Lee, please jump in if you want to add to this, any exchange of data pursuant to these provisions would have to take place with both the data and the form of transmission encrypted. In other words, if we were, you know, it wouldn't just be a thumb drive with your information on it. What it would be an encrypted file on an encrypted thumb drive. And so even if somebody could somehow get into the thumb drive like that, they still wouldn't be able to use the data without the key that would let them into the encrypted file. Now, I said thumb drive because it was an easy example. It's unlikely that we're going to be providing thumb drives in this. What it would be is secure either SFTP or VPN connections with data recipients that, again, both the data and the method of transmission are encrypted.
Again, just the process, though, you'll be as clearly and easily as possible, all due respect to all the lawyers and attorneys on this call, to allow that individual to give his or her authorization to allow that personal information to get shared. Is that correct?
Did you rephrase that, sir?
No, you said you're going to require the individual to provide their consent to allow that data to be shared.
Right.
And you're mapped out the process. Again, you're going to make that process hopefully as simple and clear as possible. That individual knows what he or she is consenting to. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Representative Yerrick. And there is no cap on questions. Are there any otherwise Representative Spiegelman would have been kicked off the committee, let's be honest, right? So, of course. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee members? Okay, would anybody like to make a motion with regards to this draft?
Motion to release.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Representative. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by your silence. All those opposed, please unmute and say nay. Hearing no opposition, that motion passes. Thank you, everybody. Holly, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. That is all the legislation I have to present to you at this meeting. So I turn it back to our chair.
Thank you very much. I appreciate, oh, hold on one second, my screen. Okay, thank you. All right, well, I want to just thank our guests as well, Dr. Lee, Ms. Schiller, Mr. Perkins. I appreciate your time. And I'm sure what was an interesting adventure through not only Sunset, but Sunset during a pandemic. So we appreciate your patience as well. And we'll continue to be in contact as those bills move through the General Assembly and continue to work collaboratively with you all to get those done.
Thank you.
So at this point, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Mark and Amanda to lead a discussion on the memo that all of the committee members received regarding proposed entities for review in 2022.
Thank you. Good morning again, everybody. So Mark is sharing a list here on the screen. So we sent this out, Mark and I put this together with the goal in mind to use the standard oversight and sunset review process to be proactive in review selection. And these entities were selected for consideration purely because they've never been reviewed. We started selecting boards created within the last 10 years, and to keep things equitable across state agencies, then we started to pull from older boards that have also never been reviewed. So in creating this list, Mark and I did some quick research. And while the review process is beneficial to any entity and the statutory intent is to eventually review every board in the state, we prioritized our list based on our preliminary research and where we think a review would be most helpful at this time. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark to share some of our suggestions.
Sorry about that. Lost my mute button for a second. I'm just going to briefly discuss the first two on this list, the Council on Libraries under the Department of State and the Delaware Motion Picture and Television Development Commission, also under state. I basically kind of prioritized these just to give you an example of two councils and commissions that have never been reviewed and also exist only in code. There really is no reference to them in any other website, in any other documentation. So basically, there's not much I can tell you about these two, only except that they exist in Delaware code and kind of nowhere else. So I will try to answer questions. I can also share those sections of code with you so you can see where they fall.
Mark, just to clarify, is this the list that we're seeing? Is this the list that we were emailed, or is this the priority?
This is the priority ones. I can,
okay, the new. So it,
right. This is simply the one that Amanda and I just kind of tweaked the order just to show you kind of on the top what were basically the biggest question marks that we had as analysts doing this kind of very, very quick research into these 20 or so entities.
And so we didn't remove anything, we just reordered them.
Correct, yes.
Okay, fantastic. I believe, and I apologize, I believe it was Representative Griffith who I saw first with the hand, and then I see Senator Hansen, Senator Pettyjohn, and Representative Spiegelman.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I have a question regarding procedure. Some of these committees have overlapping functions, if not overlapping, similar or complementary functions. So when we review them, do we review them together? I'm just wondering, to me, that would seem helpful. For instance, if you're looking at our list, number 3 is family law, Commission, then we have Provider Advisory Board, and then CPAC number 12. Those three seem to have, some, although not identical, some issues that might cross lines. So when we review these boards, do we sort of take them together as a way that's helpful to improving all of them, I guess, if there's something that we see in one that might help the other two, for instance. I also see that with what looks to be the Technology Investment Council number 12 and the STEM Council number 7. So how does that work? Do we, when you coordinate these, do you coordinate them together, or are they just kind of a la carte?
Usually a la carte. If there is overlap and there is some, for lack of a better term, redundancy, we do note that, and we do make the committee aware of that. We try to stay in our lane as much as possible and focus on the organization and the structure of the entity by name that's under review.
And I'll say to Representative Griffith, I had a somewhat of a similar conversation with our analysts, and looking into it somewhat, the flag for me was CPAC versus, the Provider Advisory Board, when in reality, CPAC's mission is to, take up issues related to abused, neglected, at-risk kids, and the Provider Advisory Board really being more of a educational piece, or at least as intended in OCCL. So while the subject matters may on its face in many cases look like they overlap quite a bit, I think we will only find out by doing the research, of course. But that was a flag for me too, and is why I looked into it, as I assume was a flag for you.
Yes, and I don't want to, take from the autonomy of our agencies, and but I do think that sometimes there's, for example, if you're looking at just the Provider Advisory Board or CPAC and Family Law Commission, you might see that background checks might be an issue that would come up with two of the three of them. Family Law Commission, CPAC might be both of those dealing with abuse allegations and how those are, so it just seems to me that it's nice if, again, not taking away from their due review process, the procedures that we undergo with our agencies. It just does seem that when we're reviewing them, we're talking about similar issues. So that might just help in terms of.
And if I could add, maybe in particular, it may help as we round out our portfolio of reviews when we're looking at kind of what do we, if we have our core reviews and as we are looking at what else to add, that could be a piece that informs it.
Yes. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Hansen.
Yeah, I guess I just have a question about what is it that we're reviewing for? So we have a lot of boards and commissions on the books. And we have quite a few of them that haven't met for a very long time and that are in effect maybe just defunct, or they haven't been able to get a quorum for a year or 2 years or more. Like when we're deciding which boards and commissions to review, are we emphasizing those that just haven't met, may have just kind of fallen by the wayside for whatever reason, so that we can terminate them and say we no longer need that, they're done? Or are we looking for ones that have met that we think we think maybe still valuable, but maybe just need some assistance? I mean, I'm trying to figure out what is it that we're trying to do with this review process. Are we trying to close the ones that are old, haven't met, or are we trying to find the ones that maybe we think we want to keep around and just fix?
I'm going to hand that over to Amanda to respond, but also just want to note that at least in my perspective of our scope and mandate, both tasks are part of it. And I think finding a balance would be, I think, the challenge that I personally think about when looking at this list. But I'll let Amanda talk about the analyst perspective.
Thank you. So the basic component of the standard sunset and oversight review is called a performance evaluation. Looking at the sunset statute, performance evaluation is mentioned in there. And in our orientation meeting in January, Mark and I kind of took everyone through our vision for like a revamped process to streamline that. Because really in picking entities, like I said a little while ago, we made this list just purely because they've never been reviewed, and we tried to focus on ones that were new. When Sunset was first created back in 1980, their first reviews came from boards that were newly created at that time. So we then, Mark and I, we did some more research just to kind of prioritize it. And the list that you have here, that's the prioritized list, like Mark mentioned, the first two on there, Council on Libraries and the Motion Picture Commission. When we went to those websites, there's not a lot of information there. So then that's an indicator to Mark and I that, you know, not saying that they shouldn't exist, but it makes them right for a review to be very the process to be beneficial to them. And there's no, like, the intent is to eventually review every board and commission in the state. So even if they're relatable, it doesn't mean we need to review both at the same time. And when we formulate the scope of a review, it is just for the entity that's selected. And then when Mark and I are going through the process of reviewing them, if we're finding other issues that maybe affect another board or another agency, we're writing that down on the side to bring to the committee's attention when we, you know, come back to meetings in January, that look, we found some additional things, but we didn't research it because it's outside of the scope. And then, you know, that could be brought up to the committee for either another review. And then we also are working on another process. In the statute, Holly's working on the revisions to present to you guys, but we're working on a better process to allow you guys, if you have something that has a specific issue or a specific problem, to have a focused review versus an evaluation of their performance. So I hope that's helpful for clarity.
Any follow-ups, Senator Hansen?
I think so. I'm just sort of kind of thinking. I know that there are a lot of boards and commissions that haven't met for a really long time. Is that something that we should be aware of? Like, should we be looking? Is there even a list of those that, or should we ask for a list of those that haven't met for, I don't know, 2 years or more, let's say, because COVID, you know, threw everybody off. So is that part of maybe what we should, I don't know, cleaning up the code, cleaning up a lot of boards and commissions that are just no longer useful or helpful, I think could be a good thing, because, you know, public policies are always changing, issues are always changing. Something becomes more important that maybe wasn't as important before, or things that were very important in the past have now gotten to a point where they're not as much focused now. And so the idea that we still have a lot of these things, you know, that are on the books that just aren't functioning anymore, it might be a good idea to have some sense as to how many are there. And should that play more of a role, or yeah, should the fact that they exist but haven't met for 2 years play more of a role in the decision-making process?
Mark and Amanda.
Mark, I don't want to fight Mark, so do you want to go first?
Not really, but only because that is such a huge question, and I know this predates Amanda and I with Holly and Lydia Massey in the governor's office, kind of performing this ongoing cleanup where, you know, Lydia may have recognized a board that hasn't met and worked with Holly to either revamp it or get rid of it, or just clean up the statute or something along those lines. So I really can't speak to what that process was like prior to coming on board. I just will kind of shift that in creating this list, it was really just two questions that we were asking about: are these boards, commissions, councils sufficiently meeting a recognized state need, or are they responsive and accountable to public interests? And at least for the two that I made number 1 and 2 on this list, I couldn't answer those questions. So that's why I put them kind of at the top, only because in doing a quick search, quicker than most probably, I could not find answers to these questions.
Maybe it sounds like it's just it's a lot of work to do to answer those questions. So perhaps that should be something that, if we have the opportunity for a legislative fellow or someone that has that's in a position to be able to do a large research project, the identification of all the boards and those that haven't met for a significant period of time, that might be a job for an intern or a fellow or something. That's what it sounds like.
And Senator Hansen, I had at least one conversation where, there was a board mentioned, and I can't remember what it is, but it had not ever been constituted, right? So the question is it subject to a review if it's never actually done anything or met, right? So I think that I agree with you wholeheartedly that finding that information is so dispersed. So if we can bring it to the forefront, then I think that with the staff and this committee, we can start to address some of those issues and understand ways that we can continue to clean up the code. So I appreciate that perspective. Holly, did you want to comment on that?
Oh,
sorry.
Thank you. I did want to say, because Mark touched on the cleanup project that we worked on when Lydia Massey was with the governor's office. And so it's actually been an ongoing project for several years, just for some context. Before I was on board with Sunset, the governor's office and the Sunset analyst, I think 2 before I started, was working on going through the code and removing entities that simply were not working. Like they had not met for many years. There were no questions about, there weren't even people to go say, hey, we want to review you now. So it was very easy to remove them from the code because there were no questions about it. That was a huge cleanup over several years. Then we went on to start cleaning up some groups or boards and commissions that Lydia identified as having some issues, quorum issues, getting appointments filled. So it wasn't as straightforward as, we know they're not meeting, we can remove them from the code. It was more like, well, we need to talk about how to make this function better, but it also doesn't need a full review. So that's why it was considered that type of a cleanup project. So that is sort of the context behind what we had done up to the last year or two. I don't know that it particularly answers any questions that have been asked today, but it does explain that we have done types of cleanups and we can continue that process. It just really depended on the type of cleanup that needed to be done, whether it turned into an actual review or was as simple as putting a bill in front of the committee to remove it because it was a completely defunct organization.
Thank you, Holly. Representative Spiegelman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are we looking for, at this point, motions for certain organizations to be put on some sort of short list or for approval for review next year? Because one of the ones on here is one that was brought to me by constituents up and down the state who were having trouble with a certain committee. And in my research, that committee has had quorum problems. They have done a lot of work to fix those problems, but I think there's still a lot of work to be done. And that's number 5, the Medical Marijuana Oversight Committee. Obviously, we want this program to work. We want this program to be effective. And I was hearing from an awful lot of patients that it was not being effective, and that was even before COVID. So if we are accepting motions for a short list or for approval, I'd like to make a motion that number 5 be put on whatever list we're doing at this point.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Representative Spiegelman. And to answer your question, yes, we can entertain motions today to add things to the list. As the memo indicated, there is room for about 10 full reviews throughout over the course of 2022. But I will say for those who are looking at this list and wanting to find more information or wanting to research more or have more discussion, we don't need to finalize that list today and have set aside time at the March 25th meeting in order to finalize the list. So I would like to give space for your motion to review the Medical Marijuana Act Oversight Committee.
Well, before we do that, let me take that back then. Since we have, how many committees do we have here?
On the list?
Yes.
21.
Okay, well,
21, 22.
Madam Chair, if we have time at that next meeting, my recommendation would be to create some sort of short list that can be approved at that next meeting. That gives all committee members time to review the different entities on that short list to see if any want to be added or subtracted. That would be my recommendation.
So is that your motion for regarding the Medical Marijuana Act Oversight Committee?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
So moved.
thank you very much for clarifying your motion. I don't disagree with that take, and I think it'll provide people some time, although I would say that if there are more than 10 entities that end up on a short list, then the 25th, we are happy to pare them down again as a way to allow the committee members between now and then to do more homework and talk to their constituents and understand how we want the committee to move forward in 2022. Was there a second to Representative Spiegelman's motion? I'll allow time for discussion following it.
I'll go ahead and second that.
Thank you very much. I can't see everyone. I believe it was Senator Pettyjohn.
Yep.
Thank you. Now I can see everyone. Perfect. Is there any further discussion to add? I'm going to say number 5 to the short list that we'll review on March 25th. Okay, all those in favor? Sorry, all those in favor signify by your silence. Opposed, please unmute yourself. Okay, motion passes. So that's the first one to our short list. Representative Spiegelman, I'm sure you may have other comments. I'm going to move to Representative Richardson for now, and then we'll circle back if we have additional. I'm sorry, Senator Richardson.
Okay. I reviewed the list and I had numbered. I thought it would be easier just to give you the numbers of the ones that I was most interested in. But I know that now the numbers have changed because they've been prioritized. I can send my list. Are we going to vote on each one of these separately? I'm not sure how we're going, what the process is. Because
I'm gonna go ahead and real quick ask Amanda and Mark if they had any preference regarding that. If not, I can go ahead and give you my preference.
I mean, speaking for us, our goal was not to take a motion and vote on all 22. It was just kind of from the organic discussion, if anything leaped out. That's kind of why we created this priority, just to give you guys a launching pad to talk about what you would like to talk about.
Excellent. And I would like to hear from members of the committee on their priorities so that we can have a more targeted discussion on March 25th. And so if there are ones, Senator Richardson, I'm actually looking at the old list and the new list next to each other. So I'm happy to take the numbers down. And I'm sure Mark can too, and we can move on in conversation, and Mark can potentially lead a conversation based on the ones you've identified, if that's helpful.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. What I'm looking at the old list and the numbers, I'll just give the names. I name a number from the old list. It's number 3, Delaware Science and Technology Council. Number 5, I do have the Medical Marijuana Act Oversight Committee. Number 6, the Water Infrastructure Advisory Council. Number 9, the Child Protection Accountability Commission. Number 10, the Delaware Motion Picture and Television Development Commission. It's something that Senator let's see, who was it? Senator Marshall and I put together, I believe. And I would like to see if that's making any progress. Number 11, the Technology Investment Council. And I think 3 or 4 of these that I identified has something to do with the with our economy, with progress as far as job creation. So that's why I have 3 or 4 of those on my particular list. Others deal with public welfare issues. Number 12 is Provider Advisory Board, DOE moved to DOE under the Office of Child Care Licensing. I have, let's see, just one more. Tourism Advisory Board, number 16. So those are the ones that I'm most interested in. And I just had another quick note, something else I wanted to mention. Some of these, I guess, have dollar amounts attached to them, the cost to taxpayers versus the importance to the welfare of our citizens. So should we be putting dollar amounts as far as what the annual cost of these projects are, or these entities are, or not? Is that important? I'd like that question answered, and then I've got a couple more.
Thank you, Senator. I'll turn it over to our analysts.
So as part of the performance evaluation of whichever entities the committee selects, the financial part of it is included in there. When we contact the entity selected for review, there's a performance questionnaire that we're turning into a report that they will complete, and that includes all their financial information, how much they get from the state to operate, or how much they need from the state to operate. So all of those questions are answered within the review process, but it's not, it hasn't been a basis on selecting the entity for review.
Okay, so we won't know that amount up front. That was my question.
No.
Okay, next thing is there a reporting requirement that would address what Senator Hansen mentioned? Do these, one thing that I was thinking is there with the computer, with the technology that we have now, that each time one of these entities met, that they could go online and report the fact that they met. At least we know that they're responding to that request. So is there a reporting requirement right now for these entities, ongoing reporting requirement?
So, no, can I answer that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Please do.
Oh, it's okay. All right. So there isn't an ongoing reporting requirement. The state does have a public meeting calendar, but important to note that some boards don't use the public meeting calendar. For example, on the list, the Walkability, hold on, I was trying to find the technical name of it, but there's a board for the Advisory Council on Walkability. There's an Advisory Council on Walkability and Pedestrian Awareness, and they do not use the state's public meeting calendar to post their agendas and minutes. And it's also important to note that in our basic research, we found that they stopped holding meetings at the end of 2019. So that's why we had prioritized that on our list at position number 4. But the governor's office was working on a project that Senator Hansen was talking about earlier that would go over and take a look at every board and commission in the state. We are going to be meeting with the Miss Lori James, who has taken over for Lydia in the governor's office in that capacity, and we're going to get a status update on that project. But that's the thing. Every board and commission in the state, it doesn't report to anyone whether or not they're meeting. It's just something the governor's office becomes aware of, and then they, let Mark and Holly know what's going on. So that's the ongoing governor's project that this committee and the governor's office has been working on. And then lastly, the original list that we sent out had listed the boards at the top that were appointed by the governor, and then there were some boards at the bottom that are not appointed by the governor. So that also has a difference onto where they post their meetings. Most times you will see boards that are appointed by the governor use the state's public meeting calendar, And then the ones that are appointed by the agency secretary typically use the agency's website.
And Senator, to your point also, depending on what the statute says for these individual boards and commissions, there might be an annual reporting requirement. They may have an annual report that they need to submit to the General Assembly and the governor, but that's kind of that's individualized when it comes to each board and their statute that is in Delaware code.
And Senator Richardson, I do appreciate the line of thinking you're going down, and I think that there's quite a lot that this group could do to provide guidelines for commissions across, wherever they are in the code, to help them run more efficiently and help them provide more information. That said, I would love to set aside that conversation for another agenda item at a future meeting and focus on this list in particular, if you all don't mind.
Sure, that's fine.
Thank you. Were there follow-up questions relating to this list though, Senator Richardson? I know you had a few. No. Okay, Representative Yerrick was next on the list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just would give my short list. I agree with Representative Spiegelman about the medical marijuana commission or committee. We've heard a variety of comments, concerns about the overall working system of the medical marijuana dispensaries. 2, the Water Infrastructure Commission. 3 would be Family Law Commission. And my 4th that made the short list would be the Governor's Commission on Community Service and Volunteerism. Those are my top 4. I'd just like to add that in.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Senator Pinckney was next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just providing my list as well. I'm going to read the names because I'm looking at both lists. So I have Advisory Council on Pedestrian Awareness and Walkability. Some of these were already stated, but just reiterating. Delaware State Arts Council, Technology Investment Council. Also noting on the screen, on the doc on screen, the last 2 are both number 12, just clerical error. For the other one is Child Protection Accountability Commission. And then I also have, sorry, being selfish, I put 7 of them down. Manufactured Homes Installation Board, Water Infrastructure Advisory Council, and Interagency Council on Adult Literacy.
Thank you so much, Senator Pinckney.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I'm happy for if individuals do have their own short lists or their own rankings. I'm really interested if you would share those with the analysts and perhaps using both their criteria and the feedback from each of the committee members, they can start to kind of rank our shortlist in that way. I see Mark shaking his head, but I don't want to dissuade anyone from sharing publicly where their priorities lie. I would just like that information to be memorialized for the analysts as well. Representative Johnson, you are next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to, go to the screen, make sure I get this right. My short list, I've identified 5. Let's see. The first is Advisory Council on Pedestrian Awareness and Walkability. Next, Medical Marijuana Act, Oversight Committee. Then Interagency Council on Adult Literacy. Child Protection Accountability Commission. And then finally, Governor's Commission on Community and Volunteer Services. So those were the 5 that I selected. I can certainly also send these in email as well to the team. Madam Chair, I know that you said we will put something on an upcoming meeting regarding the conversation about categorizing the list. May I make a comment? And I won't go very long at all.
You have the floor.
Thank you. My comment is that I agree with that thought. I listened to Mark talk about the categories and what helped them come up with this list. I also took into consideration what Senator Hansen suggested. I like that as well. I'm not trying to create additional work, but I think having multiple categories which we could pick from would be extremely helpful. And there was something else, not only helpful, but really productive as it relates to identifying which entity should be evaluated. There was something else, but I said I was going to be quick. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative, and the floor will go back to you as soon as you raise your hand and remember, because I know for me that usually happens about 30 seconds after I say so. I wanted to comment and only to clarify something with the help of Mark and Amanda, because I want to make sure I have the right understanding. The list you provided, I believe this is a recommendation for the full review. In the potential reviews or cleanup or more targeted pieces, as you say in your memo, even the component reviews that we may institute this year would be in addition to the full reviews that are being proposed using this list. Is that correct?
Correct. And those targeted or component reviews, if a member has something that's on this list that is of interest, like instead of doing a full performance evaluation, if like some mention the adult literacy, if there's a specific concern with that, we could do it as just a focused review or component review versus the full. And I'm just using that as an example, instead of doing a full performance evaluation. So that is on the table. We just put together a starting point or launching point where our thoughts were, just because in the statute, the intent is to eventually review every board and commission. So there, like I said, the basis of creating this list was just boards and commissions that were created within the last 10 years. And then when we started making that list, we didn't want to pick on just one agency because there's many agencies within the state. So then we started grabbing some that were older, created a lot older than the 10-year classification that we had. So that's how the list came up. And when you select things for review, like the sunset has to review something. So you don't have to, it doesn't have to be something with an identified problem. Like you can just pick something to review for a performance evaluation.
Thank you. And so just to make sure that we're all still remembering the information that we heard in orientation, which now feels like years ago, the component review is the new type of review that you as analysts are hoping to bring to this process. And I know that you had asked for information from the committee members prior to March 25th so that you could do some initial research to see if a component review or to see if a particular issue was well suited for a component review. So I would ask the committee members after this meeting, if your constituents have raised specific questions, or if you are aware of a board that is having trouble meeting quorum or that is not meeting regularly, and that a more targeted review or to be blunt about it, maybe just an entire performance review not being warranted based on the information, please forward that information as well to Mark and Amanda, and they can come back with on the 25th with more information for us. Representative Griffith was next.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. My short list includes the Family Law Commission, number 18. The two technology committees, number 11, Technology Investment Council, as well as the STEM, which I'm trying to, there's a couple of them. Delaware Science and Technology Council, number 3. And then, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble locating on my list. I'm not looking, I'm looking at my phone. Number 7, which is the Delaware Science and Technology Council. That's the same. That's right. I'm sorry. I have two lists. I'm looking at the one that's on the screen and also one that's on that was sent previously. So I'm sorry for any confusion. So those two, the Advisory Council on Pedestrian Awareness and Walkability. And again, there are some of these that are on here by virtue of how old they are. And, you know, some of them are, to me, or at least one I see is seems to be a well-oiled machine, and that it meets frequently, its members show up. So when we're discussing this, does that come into play, or is this just you know, because we're sunset, we review them? That's I'm just a little curious as to how we're going to make our decision. Like, I looked at Family Law Commission created in '84, so that's an old commission. So and it has never been reviewed. So looking at the fact that it's almost 40 years old in 2 years, you know, it's what, you know, I just, the process would be I'm still a little stuck on how we choose these.
Well, and Representative, I think that is part of what today.
Oh, can I add one to my short list too, which is the, okay, can I add number 10, the State Scenic and Historic Highway Advisory Board? How many did I gave you?
Representative, I'm having a little bit trouble hearing you. I'm not sure if it's just
Oh,
me.
sorry, all done.
Can you hear me okay? Okay, she's back on mute. And I just wanted to address, thank you for sharing your priorities. I wanted to address the question of how do we choose?
It might be my connection. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I apologize. How choose is part, and I believe should be part of the discussion today. And I'm happy to not just talk about the entities themselves, but hear from committee members on where their priorities lie, whether it be something as simple as time from inception or something along the lines that we talked about. I know Senator Richardson mentioned budget, and I know other folks have mentioned quorum and activity. So those types of inputs are helpful to discuss our priorities. I'll move to Senator Pettyjohn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to go down my kind of short list here, and this is based off the original list that was emailed to us. So we've got advisory number 4, Advisory Council on Pedestrian Awareness and Walkability. As several members have mentioned, the Medical Marijuana Oversight Committee. I've got Water Infrastructure Advisory Council. I've got Child Protection Accountability Commission, and then the Governor's Commission on Community and Volunteer Service.
Thank you, Senator Pettyjohn.
Yep.
And I would reiterate, please do send those lists over to our analysts so that and if there are any thoughts you because you have certain priorities related to them, please share that as well. And 1 second, we're going to see Representative Dorsey Walker is rejoining us. Representative, welcome back.
Thank you. Sorry for those technical difficulties.
No problem. Did you want to share anything related to this list? I want to make sure you had time to comment.
I am fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I also wanted to add for the committee that this is a list that was developed, as the analysts explained, with certain criteria in mind. If there are other boards and commissions that are not here, as I stated before with the component review, other boards and commissions may be excellent candidates for a performance review as well. So please feel free to share those now, or feel free to share those directly with the analysts. You can use the Sunset email box if that's easy to access. I have a quick point for clarification, or I guess for comment, if folks would indulge me in the conversation. I noticed that the Department of the Division of Library Council on Libraries I didn't hear it on anyone's list unless I missed it. And it was created in the 70s and not reviewed. And I'm just curious if anyone, if that was a flag for anyone else. For me, I thought it might make it a good candidate for review.
I'd get behind that. The idea of cleaning, Senator Hansen's idea of cleaning up the code a little bit. I think that one would be quite easy to do, to add to our list if we've also got some others that are heavier lifting.
Okay. All right, I want to give space for additional comments or questions as folks have heard others' lists and have heard some of the discussion.
Madam Chair, just really quickly. Sorry about the jumping in. I was wondering, what did we decide on the Delaware motion picture entity?
We haven't made any decisions related to it, but it did come up, if I'm keeping track, in at least one person's short list.
Okay. I think I would like to see where we are with that, because I feel like we could be bringing a lot of revenue to the state through that particular entity.
Okay, excellent. I think that's a good enough reason as any to take a look and see if they are providing the most value and if we can advise them on that.
And full disclosure, I'm a filmmaker by trade, so think of
Well, then you're more creative than I. Also, I'm going to, I want to make sure that this process, or that we come away from this meeting with not only everyone's comfort with sharing their priorities and any comments related to the list, but also want to make sure that our analysts and our entire staff team has what they need in order to make our next meeting on March 25th productive. I know that we had discussed the Medical Marijuana Act Oversight Committee, and that did come up on several people's short lists. So what I'll say is if we could include that on a short list and then rank the remaining based on the feedback today and any additional feedback that is sent to the analyst, let's say through Tuesday, if you wouldn't mind, if that's an okay deadline to send your feedback through. And then of course, Representative Dorsey Walker and I are available to anyone on the committee if you'd like to discuss any specifics or have any questions. We're happy to spend time as well. Are there any objections, comments, or concerns with that process moving into the March 25th meeting? It's always good to propose a process pretty far into a meeting so that folks aren't too upset about it. All right, are there any other comments or questions? And I'll say for the staff as well, anything that you wanted to share with us prior to wrapping up this conversation. I don't want to cut anyone off here.
Senator Gay, I believe Representative Hansen has her hand raised.
Oh, I am so sorry. I can't see that, Representative Hansen. That's my bad. Please always interrupt me.
So now I'm in the other house. Okay. I have a short list, but it's kind of a scattershot short list. So okay. Sort of based on the age, but then importance, and that was brought up by Representative Sherry Dorsey, the Delaware Motion Picture and Television Development Commission. I think that's an important one for us to take a look at. The Governor's Commission on Community and Volunteer Service, the Advisory Council on Pedestrian Awareness and Walkability, the Interagency Council on Adult Literacy, and just age-wise, the Delaware Humanities Council. So I wanted to get those out.
Thank you. Now that I have moved my screen so I can see all the raised hands, I'm seeing none. And so I will again ask for Mark and Amanda if you would be so kind to bring us a new list, we'll call it, that will hopefully demonstrate not only your priorities, or I'll say the list that you created using the criteria priorities that have been shared here and that will be shared, and then also a report as to how, as to any component review or other cleanup work that's been suggested. And I'll turn the floor over to you both now.
I was just going to simply say, based on all the boards that committee members have listed, I count 17 from the list of 22. So if it would be helpful, what Mark and I can do after this meeting is just email out that list of 17 that's just anything that was mentioned by anybody, not, some members have mentioned the same thing more than once, but we can also kind of prioritize the list of 17 by how many times it was mentioned, if that's helpful as well. And just let us know what other information you would like to see in that list that we could quickly get, and we'll send that over to you.
And if you could just, Amanda, give it a day or two so that folks can, who weren't sharing their list today, can send it to you, give them time to email you.
Oh, definitely. I just think it would be helpful just to send a list of kind of a recap of this meeting. And then if members didn't see something that was on that list, which you had suggested to get back to us by Tuesday, if that works.
That's perfect. Thank you.
I meant to mention this and I didn't. Our goal next year with this in picking between 6 and 10 entities is to kind of expand the workload a little bit. So to be asking a little bit more of the committee next year when it comes to meetings and the number of meetings that will need to occur if 10 entities are placed under review. So I just wanted to preface, or I guess finalize the discussion with that kind of asterisk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Looking forward to getting to work. Senator Richardson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I was just hoping that someone could send me or send all the members of the committee an email address to respond to with our list of priorities.
We will.
It would be, I'm sorry, I was going to say the email address that Mark and I use, it's a group mailbox. It's sunset@delaware.gov. That's where we email out to the committee from. So if you just send there, Mark and I both get those emails.
Okay, thank you.
And that's where we will be sending out the list from today. We will be sending it from that email box, so you can just simply reply to that email.
All right, thank you. Well, that concludes our agenda for this meeting, and our next meeting will be a week from today, Thursday, March 18th at 9 a.m. bright and early, where we'll discuss recommendations related to the Health Resources Board. There's no other questions or comments. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Great work.
Mark, you're shaking your head. What did one of us do?
I forgot to stop sharing my screen when the conversation wrapped up, so I'm sure the YouTube stream looks just wonderful with that big box sitting there.
Are we all set?
Sheree, I was going to say, Sheree, are you available to end the meeting? We're still streaming.
Okay. I'm happy to have the committee members sign off. Thank you. I appreciate you trying to log on for the rest of the stream. We'll get it. We'll work with DTI to fix it.
All right, thanks. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you. You too.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Great job, staff. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Representative.
Amanda, are you able to work with TTI, or do we have an email address?
I have Tim. I do not know what the status is.
Okay, no worries.
I guess if we just all leave the meeting, then the stream will end eventually, so we could just all close out.
I think that's a good call, and I think it might be the first time the legislature has tried it. So let's see how it goes. Thanks to everyone watching.
Signing off.
Bye.
Thank you.